État-voyou. This is from Rogues, Section 8, page 78. The last of the rogue states, the democracy to come, opening in 2 turns. I've already played a great deal with this verbal thing, voyou. This idiom of recent or modern French invention, dating back only to the 19th century, to the beginning, therefore, of an urban society entering the age of industrial capitalism, close parentheses. An idiom of popular origin and barely French, but also, in spite of, or actually because of all this, an untranslatable or barely translatable incrimination, a sort of French interjection or exclamation, voyou, exclamation point, which, I neglected to say, can be turned with the right intonation into something tender, affectionate, maternal. When I was little, my maternal grandmother would sometimes say, pretending to be angry with me, voyou, va, exclamation point. You little rascal. I have played a great deal with this word, which, while remaining untranslatable, nonetheless becomes the expression état voyou, a more than recent translation, almost still brand new, barely used, approximate, franglaise, Franglish, Frenchglish, Franglaise, of the Anglo-American rogue state, that's so very singular in indictment that I discovered for the first time in my own language a little more than a year ago, and doubly associated with the state when it was announced after a cabinet meeting that the president and the prime minister at the time, in spite of their cohabitation, that is, in spite of belonging to different political parties, had agreed on the development of a nuclear weapon aimed at combating or deterring what the statement read on the steps of the Élysée presidential palace called états voyous. I have thus spoken a great deal of this word voyou. It's not in quotes, italicized. For the word itself is a voyou of language. Of what has recently become, and such is my hypothesis. See? We risk propositions when we do deconstruction. Here is the hypothesis. A useful slogan or rallying cry for the coalition of what are called Western democracies. What is the hypothesis? I have thus spoken a great deal of this word voyou, of what has recently become, and such is my hypothesis. It has recently become, and will remain, for only a short time still, a useful slogan or rallying cry for the coalition of what are called Western democracies. Only for a short time still, I guess. Well, this is a few years old, it's a few decades old. In this word voyou, I've thus let appear by turns the noun and the attribute or adjective, a nominal adjective sometimes attached to a who and sometimes accorded to a what. For example, état voyou. For in the French idiom, someone can do something that is voyou without actually being a voyou. And in the beginning, I said successively, you may recall, using the word voyou 4 different times, sometimes as a noun, sometimes as an adjective qualifying someone or something of someone, it would no doubt be, on my part, dare I say it, a bit voyou, a bit roguish, if not roue, R-O-U-E, with the accent on the E. Were I not to begin here by declaring yet one more time my gratitude. Voyou here qualifies something, an attitude. Read, propositional attitude, dear David Lewis. That's, pardon my commentary. I then added, I would thus be, you might think, not only voyou or roguish, but a voyou, a real rogue, parentheses. Were I not to declare at the outset of my endless and bottomless gratitude. I probably read that wrong. I then added, I would thus be, you might think, not only voyou or roguish, but a voyou, a real rogue. Were I not to declare at the outset my endless and bottomless gratitude. The attribute voyou can thus sometimes be applied to a subject that is not substantially, that is, through and through, or naturally, a voyou. Now he's trying to pick on the reification problems. Is there a metaphysics of voyou? He's complicating. A rogue. Naturally, the attribute voyou can thus sometimes be applied to a subject that is not substantially, that is, through and through, or naturally, a voyou, a rogue. Merely an attribute. My comment. The quality voyou is always precisely an attribution. The predicate or categoria, and thus the accusation, leveled not against something natural, but against an institution. It is an interpretation, an assignation, and in truth always a denunciation, a complaint, or an accusation, a charge, an evaluation, a verdict. As such, it announces, prepares, and begins to justify some sanction. The état voyou must be punished, contained, rendered harmless, reduced to a harmless state, if need be by the force of law, droit, and the right, droit, of force. I am drawing attention to this idiomatic distinction between the adjective and the noun, in order already to help us think about the fact that in this French expression of very recent date, état voyou, which, as untranslatable as it is, as I said, will have been but an approximate translation of the Anglo-American rogue state. We do not know exactly how voyou should be heard or understood. We do not know whether it should be as a substantive linked by a hyphen to the substantive state, as in my comment, rogue-state, right? Thereby indicating that some state is substantially a voyou and thus would deserve to disappear as a non-constitutional state or state of non-law, or whether Voyou is an attribute, the quality temporarily attributed out of some strategic motivation by certain states to some other state that, from some point of view or in some context during a limited period of time, would be exhibiting voyou behavior, appearing not to respect the mandates of international law, the prevailing rules and the force of law of international ontology, deontology, not international ontology, deontology, ethics. Such as the so-called legitimate and law-abiding states interpret that in accordance with their own interests. These are the states that have at their disposal the greatest force and are prepared to call these états voyous in order to bring them back to reason, if need be, by armed intervention, whether punitive or preemptive. Here is where the problem of états voyous that I announced in this beginning forms a real knot, that is, K-N-O-T. To understand this knot, like a fisherman's knot, a braid, I am not trying to undo it. I will follow 3 threads of very unequal length. Unequal for reasons of economy and because I do not wish to try your patience. The first thread, the longest, although still a little more than a quick connection, would be the one that links the question of what we have called the democracy to come, of what this syntagma might mean. That's syntagma, syntagma, S-Y-N-T-A-G-M-A, syntagma. Syntagm. Syntagma square. This is square. And I have to stop at that. I have to stop and look up syntagma because I'm not a good Greek to not know that. That's syntagma, syntagm. I don't even know how it's usually pronounced. A linear combination of elements governed by rules of succession and compatibility whose meaning arises from position and relation, not intrinsic content. Canonical examples: words in a sentence, notes in a melodic phrase, acts in a legal or political sequence. Sounds good to me. Doesn't sound very square to me. Oh well. Syntagm. I mean, how is it supposed to be pronounced? Sintagm. GM pronounced like paradigm. So that would be syntam or syntagm.